So thank you all for coming. I'm Jimmy Trevor, and my forum presentation is called The Right School for the Right Child, Serving the Needs of Free-Spirited Children and Teens. I'm going to start off by talking a bit about the stories by which we sort of organize our culture, or the stories we tell to each other about how things work and how to get ahead in life. And that brings us to the story of school, which is ultimately pretty simple in most places. It's you go to school, you get good grades. You go to high school, you get good grades. You go to a good college, you get good grades. And apparently after that, everything is wonderful forever. Because this is the premier thing to do, to prepare yourself for life. And in keeping with that story, I'd like to tell you another, more detailed story about an individual, a young boy who was very bright and creative and a voracious reader and had a lot of talent. And his parents saw that potential and decided to make the best use of it, put an investment into the future, and they pushed him to do as well as he could in school. And he was a very compliant child. He was willing to go along with what he was told. And over the years, he got good grades. He went to high school, actually Stevenson High School, one of the most prestigious public high schools in the country, plenty of wealth, plenty of opportunities there. Got good grades, graduated with highest honors. Went on to college, Carthage College up in Kenosha, and got good grades there too, and got his degree. And according to the standard story that everyone tells, and perhaps is even more prevalent in the North Shore, this kid should have been the very picture of competence and confidence and effectiveness, because he had made all the right moves. He'd followed all the rules, he'd worked very hard, he put the nose to the grindstone, he'd avoided drugs and alcohol and some of the other pitfalls that typically snare kids, or we're afraid that they'll snare kids when they're in their teenage years or something like that. And yet, while the standard story would expect he was doing very well, nothing could be further from the truth. Now, of course, if there are some people who are quite happy in the regular system, that's perfectly fine. But for this particular bright, creative kid, he wasn't just intelligent for the sake of academics. He was also, at his heart, free-spirited and needed freedom, needed the ability to pursue his own interests and curiosities from a moment-to-moment basis. Loved to read back when he could go to the library and just pick out any random book and pursue it as long as he liked. As years went by and he was given more and more reading lists and told exactly how to do it and how to annotate and so forth, he not only read less, but he also enjoyed less of what he was reading. In addition, he found himself with less and less time to pursue the creative projects that he deeply wanted to pursue. People told him that might be nice, and that's all well and good, but what you really need are those grades. So, being the compliant kid that he was, he went for the grades. This, to put it mildly, was not good for his mental health. He developed a great fear of being anything less than perfect. He developed this notion that apparently the broader world was a place that would eat you up if you didn't have great grades. This was the only criteria he could really name that apparently made the difference between happiness and sadness in life. And that was really difficult because the process of getting those grades was making him miserable, intensely miserable. He learned to hate himself at the age of 9. He had to, in order to suppress his natural feelings, in order to keep going to the school building and getting those good grades all the time. At age 18, he suffered a nervous breakdown. His mind sort of broke from all the stress. He developed dizzy spells, vertigo, heart palpitations, a variety of symptoms, and went to a whole bunch of doctors, and eventually a specialist told him, maybe you're just really stressed. And that, turns out, was the cause of it. It was psychosomatic. He went to college, yes, but spent most of his time lying down. He couldn't physically walk around all that much with all the dizziness. He would get up, go to class, come back, lie down for the day. And by the time he graduated with his degree and his 3.3 GPA, when he should have been the very model of confidence and effectiveness, he found himself deeply, deeply afraid and depressed and ineffective. He went out into the real world having no idea how to deal with anything. He found himself so burdened by stress that tasks that other people would find simple were for him very, very difficult. And this is a true story, and I know it's true because it happened to me. I was that little boy. I was very bright and creative, and I suffered like crazy trying to please my parents and trying to do what the school seemed to be asking of me. And I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. Again, if there are people who are doing fine in the regular system, great for them. But there are some of us who do not do well. I want to talk to you about the value of freedom. It's something that, at least allegedly, we hold in very high regard. It is right there in our Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yet I've heard it said that Americans have this paradox, or really not just America, have a paradox in which we value freedom, but we don't fully value the process by which freedom develops, particularly in children. Kids who are given a chance to be free, if they're free-spirited at heart, will learn how to navigate and how to adjust their actions to what they need in a given moment. Now, developmental psychologist Peter Gray has done studies on this and written a book, and he's looked into how kids can learn so much faster when they have the freedom to pursue their curiosities. How kids will be more focused, naturally, if you give something that they want to focus on. And how kids, especially if they're compliant to a autocratic system, as it were, find themselves unable to focus, and then find themselves beating themselves up for that, because everyone is mad at them for getting something less than an A. And parents may be very well intentioned, believing in the story that I mentioned, this is the story of school, this is the investment, it will pay off. And in my case, it didn't. I'm 30 years old now. I've spent 12 years recovering from my nervous breakdown. And I'm more on my feet now than I was a few years ago, but it didn't have to be this hard. Now, part of the reason I love bringing this to the Unitarian church is because the church is so open-minded about how different people need different paths in life. For instance, we're very much on board with LGBT rights. And I happen to belong to that because I'm bi. And I've been fortunate enough that I haven't encountered hardly any homophobia in my personal life. And that's nice. I've learned a community of people that were tolerant and respectful of that. But when it came to another part of my personality, the need to determine my own day, the need to pursue interests and not be boxed in and being a slave to the bells and so forth, you know. You might actually get interested in math one day, and then the bell rings. You can't learn math anymore. No more math. Go learn geography or something. And that just throws you off all the time. I put it to you that being a free-spirited person inside an autocratic system is like being a gay person inside a homophobic system. And what I mean by that is, even if people are trying to be nice, trying their best to be as compassionate and supportive as they can, if you are gay and they're trying to be nice, but they're still holding on to intolerance, they're going to hurt you. Right? They're going to say things like, well, I mean, you know, maybe you're confused. Maybe it's a phase, you'll grow out of it, and you know, babe, have you thought about, yeah, no, don't show me your boyfriend. Can you have a girlfriend sometime? Just, you know, at some point, just be nice. I'm not pressing you, I'm just saying. And that is painful, to not be recognized for who you are. And I went through a similar pain of not being recognized for my need to be free. The great joy I would have reading what I wanted at the time I wanted, bouncing around between hundreds of random creative ideas. And again, I know I'm not the only one, because there have been plenty of studies that point out there are kids like this, numbering in the millions to be sure, who could do with something much, much better. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how school could be better, and wondering if you could have something where kids can enjoy childhood and also enjoy adulthood. Because there's this sort of puritanical assumption baked in there, at least some of the time, in which you have to suffer in order to succeed. By definition, the more you suffer, the more reward you will get. That doesn't work out in every case. There may be specific things in life which are difficult and worthwhile. There are other things in life which are difficult and pointless. The task of, again, to our previous analogy, if you were gay and you took on the difficult task of pretending to be straight, there's no great reward coming for you at the end of 10 or 20 years of doing that. It's just self-denial all the way down. So I looked it up post-college and found there is a better way. The broadest umbrella of this term is called self-directed education. More particularly, I found Sudbury schools, which are schools without a curriculum. They don't tell you what to learn and when to learn it. They provide resources and they say go wild. It's basically like a museum, except with every topic you could think of. And I always meant to say that to myself when I was young. I said, I like what I call museum learning. Can I just run around with the different exhibits? This is like that with the whole world. They have all the books. You go on, they have the internet naturally, they have adults on staff who will help you with things. They'll connect you with businesses in the community. They do a lot of internships. You want to learn to be a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker, we'll send you to an actual person like that and you can see, which is another problem with the regular system. You get to the point of college, you're going to choose your major now, you're going to figure out where you want to be, and most of us haven't had any practical experience in that field. I got a degree in computer science, eventually went to work in an office, and discovered I hate working in an office. And you may yet use that degree in other ways, but gee, wouldn't it be nice to explore what the world is like and what options there are for you? I have been to Sudbury schools. I should mention first off that the first of these is over 50 years old, founded in 1968. It's been running strong since then, still in operation. There are about 40 Sudbury schools in the country. There are 70 of them in the world. A year ago, I interned at Hudson Valley Sudbury School in Eastern New York, drove out 15 hours to get there, spent 2 weeks at an Airbnb, and before that, I had volunteered at Tallgrass Sudbury School, which is the only one of its kind in Illinois thus far. And in both cases, I felt like a fish to water. The kids were alive. They were running around talking and interested in whatever they were doing and coming up with different projects. Someone over here is composing music, someone there is like building their own skateboard from scratch. Someone here is writing a novel. This one kid every day just walked in with his laptop and he's just not even online, just writing the novel because that's what he wanted to do. And I heard the stories from graduates who got through Sudbury and then went to college. Like perfectly normal colleges actually are very willing to accept you even though you don't have a regular transcript. What they do is a narrative transcript. We say, well, these are the cool projects I got up to because they have plenty of time to do that. And you may take one standardized test. You may take the SATs or something. You study for that, maybe. But you didn't need to study for 7 AP classes like I did and all the accelerated and honors classes that came before that. So what I find here is this marvelous jewel of an idea that almost no one has heard of because it goes so against our assumptions of how kids learn that people don't even imagine it's an option. And I find that really strange, particularly when you consider how people learn to walk and talk. Because that is very self-directed, actually. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but did anyone here, when you were like 1 or 2 years old, did someone give you a curriculum and say, at week 3, you have to be taking at least 2 steps, and then you learn to walk sideways and hop on 1 foot, there's a specific list. Well, no. Kids learn by observing people around them, and they're like, everyone's walking. This is pretty, let's see what I can do, And you stumble around a lot, and you eventually get the hang of it. This ability to self-educate from our surroundings, and by the way, learning a language is also a huge undertaking, which kids do apparently with little effort at all. This ability to self-educate does not necessarily suddenly stop at the age of 4 or 5. But we assume it does. You put the kids in the classroom, and now you will learn X, and you will learn Y, and you will learn Z. And I sympathize for teachers that want to, teach kids. They want to prepare the next generation for life. That's lovely. I think even the teachers nowadays are getting frustrated with all the standardized tests they have to teach to, which has gotten even worse in my days since high school, let alone when I was in it. I remember the administrators being concerned about our rankings, and I think the U.S. News and World Report, they do like once a year, they rank all the high schools, and they rank them strictly by how many AP classes you take. Not even what your grades were in those classes, just how many did you take. Yeah, at least they did at one point, or I heard so. But the idea was, you're not measuring whether or not anyone is truly succeeding in the sense of living out their own life and their own dreams. It's how many boxes can you check on this list? It kind of looks good on a resume and stuff. And Sudbury provides a way by which people can keep their innate freedom and curiosity and all the benefits that come with that. Typically at a Sudbury school, kids will learn 6 years of mathematics in about 5 months when they get around it. You don't know at what age they'll get interested, but they'll get interested and they'll pick it up. Likewise with reading, people ask sometimes, how do the kids learn to read? Oh, they all learn to read, because sooner or later you realize that's very useful. Whatever your aim is in life, you're going to need to read something. Kids will typically go from not reading at all to reading Harry Potter books for fun in about 9 months. Again, you don't know at what age they'll get interested, but they'll get interested and it'll happen. I say before I was interested to bring this to the Unitarian people because the more I think about it, the more I realize we have a lot of principles in common. I've heard it said that the Unitarian Universalist Church can be summarized as the church of whatever. We don't care what you believe as long as you're a good person. And Sudbury, in a way, is the school of whatever. We don't care what you're learning right now, just have fun and learn something, and I'm sure it works for you, and it does. This is the part where I'd normally be looking at my slides, but be respecting each person as a unique individual. Obviously, Sudbury is extremely individualized, while at the same time having a community sense to it. Offering fair and kind treatment. We have our own little justice system and make sure, when I say freedom, you're not allowed to go punch people or steal stuff or whatever. So we do insist on fairness. Learning to learn in a community. In this case, it says the others at our church, but kids do learn in groups naturally. You'll find someone knows a skill and they'll just teach 3 or 4 of their friends, so we'll teach 3 or 4 of their friends and so forth. We mix all the age groups together, by the way. Older kids will often teach younger kids and sometimes vice versa. And there's a great sharing of knowledge and not this competitive thing, which if you think about it, if you do too good of a job in regular school of tutoring your peers, your class ranking might go down. Or at least it'll be tougher to keep your rank. And there are, of course, kids that nevertheless help each other, but this is really founded in helping each other. The ability to search freely for what is true, free inquiry. We don't give you a test and say you have to memorize these answers and bring them back to us. We say, go learn things, and you're free to disagree. I remember very clearly one time in high school where we were reading Letters from a Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King. And there's some line in there where he says that groups are more evil than individuals. And in the packet, we were doing this all together, like out loud with the teacher. Okay, this part, why are groups more evil than individuals? And I raised my hand to say, well, wait, I don't think that's true, actually. A group is maybe more something than an individual, potentially. But if groups of people can inspire each other to do evil, then other groups of people, like, say, Martin Luther King's marchers, could inspire each other to do good. Because how many of them would have the guts to march all by themselves, right? But in a group, they have power. I remember the teacher just kind of staring at me. And all the kids just kind of went quiet. And it was, but the packet says this. You don't get to have a free search for truth very much in the regular system. Whoever printed out that packet has their own ideas, and you better go with it. Likewise, insisting on a world of peace and freedom goes right along hand with fair and kind treatment to all. And we do respect the interdependent web of life just by living in it. It's not just the interdependence of nature, which I know is that last principle is primarily about, but also by letting kids reach out and see the rest of the real world. Once you're certified on safety, you can typically go down the street to the cafe and get lunch or something. I talk about internships programs and whatever. We're talking about the interdependentness of society itself, where normally children are sort of sequestered, And there are safety concerns that they do address. But once you can prove that something is safe, oh sure, go explore the world. See the different connections that make up civilization to better find your place in it. So as I said, there is one Sudbury school here in Illinois, and I think that is far too few, because there are more kids like me who need something better. So this is my project. I am founding a Sudbury school somewhere in the North Shore area. It is called Riverwind. And we have a number of people interested, some parents, some kids, some people that may be staffers, and people that are helping us find a location, and so forth. I've got these nifty business cards right here. And I am reaching out to this community for whatever support you can offer. If anyone wants to volunteer or provide ideas or talk to families you know that might want to enroll kids or anything of the kind. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's a kid attending Stevenson or some similar school, going through the same stuff that I went through. And I'll leave you with a sobering statistic. The teenage suicide rate doubles during the school year and drops in half again during winter break, spring break, and summer break. So this is not just an idle concern about how some kids are lazy or something and need to be pushed. There are some kids who are at the end of their rope, and frankly, not all of us survive. We can make a better future for those kids. We can spare them the pain they would have gone through being forced into a system that was never built for them. And I want to be part of the movement to make that possible. Thank you.
Do you want me to stop the
Any
recording?
questions?
You want me to keep the
You
recording
keep the
going?
questions, yeah. I mean, assuming people don't mind being filmed.
Where's the other school?
Tallgrass is in Riverside, Illinois, by Oak Park, a little south of that, so west of the city. I used to live in that area, and I would be there like every day. And oh my gosh, that was uplifting. So I want to bring it
How
back
many
to this
kids
area.
there?
Right now, I think it's 27 kids. These tend to be very small schools, and they rent out space from a church. The largest Sudbury school is around 125 right now. Hudson Valley was around 75. So not many people know about the movement yet. And if you're going to ask me what the downside is of Sudbury, that's one downside I could name, is that there are fewer people. But it doesn't have to stay that way forever. And in the meantime, the kids tend to get to know each other really well. You know, not out of a sense of desperation, just out of a sense of like they have lots of time to talk, and they tend to have all sorts of amazing little in-jokes and histories and so forth. Yes?
Where are you on your dream path?
I am on the path of doing presentations and spreading the word. We've looked at a couple places for rent that we could get at like $1,500 a month. If I had 20 kids, I could make the math work. I have maybe 8 kids, but like no one has actually signed a check. So when I say 8, I don't know, maybe half of them don't actually sign checks. So we're still kind of at the beginning of this. I wish I could say that we have just signed the lease and everyone could sign up, but right now I gotta spread the word. That's what I'm doing.
So how is it different from Waldorf, the Waldorf schools?
So Waldorf has a different curriculum, as I understand it. We have no curriculum.
Okay.
So that's what people, they take the kids to alternative schools. They say, oh, well, here's a school that emphasizes being bilingual in Spanish or French or something. Here's a school that emphasizes the arts, creativity and stuff, which is lovely. That can help. Sudbury School is meant to be sort of the universal adapter, like whatever it is you want to learn. If you want to be an engineer, if you want to be a dancer, if you want to be a chef. We had one kid, because we do thesis projects, by the way. At the end of your term, when you would graduate, you do a project, if you want to, and the theme is prove that you can navigate the adult world. So this kid wanted to be a chef, and he just cooked up a banquet, And the teachers all tasted it, and I was like, yep, you're graduating. This is good. I say teachers, we call them staffers, because we have such a different idea of what it means to normally teach. You go to a Sudbury school, you see a lot of tables, chairs, and couches, not all the desks in rows, because and for that matter, why do we all eat lunch at the same time? It's so bizarre at regular schools, Because Sudbury's like, when are you hungry? Go, there's the food, there's the fridge over there, go get your food and eat it. When you feel like it. Why would we tell you? That there's a sort of factory mentality to the regular schools.
I was obviously one of those kids who worked just well in the average.
Okay.
So, the question I would have is, if I were a parent, how would I even have a sense that this would be good? Because I think for a lot of kids, that lack of structure is not anything that they are able to deal with. So, it seems to me that that's sort of part of the issue is, how do you figure out which kids can thrive in this? Because there are some kids who can't.
They tell you.
They tell you is the first answer.
Okay.
They tell you. It's the same reason that people homeschool. Sudbury is really homeschooling in
At
a
a
group,
location, yeah.
in a single location. It
Specifically unschooling.
well, I call it life schooling.
Oh, well, There's
which I
different
prefer
terms.
because when you use the term unschooling,
Yeah.
it implies that the kids aren't learning. It
Ah.
doesn't, the PR around the term unschooling is really bad. So I
never
use the
thought of
term
that.
life schooling, and then people say, ooh, that sounds interesting, what does that mean?
Okay.
And now I've got my door open and I say, well, it
Yeah.
means you learn based on what's going on in the world, what's going on in your life, what you're interested in
I
at
see.
any point in time, and what resources pop up at the last minute. And then people say, ooh, I really like that. Can I do that with you? Why? I wish I could have done that, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. And I think, and Sudbury is very like that. You learn based on what's going on in the world, what's going on in your lives, what you're interested in at any given point in time, the resources that are available. And the teachers serve as catalysts. They're not directors, they serve as catalysts. So you might ask, how do you know whether, it's basically the question is, how do you know whether your kid fits in the system or not? And the
yeah.
answer is, they show you when they tell you.
Yeah, if you ask the honest questions of how are you doing, and they know that they can come to you with an honest response.
I have a question,
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Deb. So Deb, if there was a Sudbury school that was available in Deerfield, Highland Park, whatever
Uh-huh.
it is, when your kids were little, would
We
you
would have
send?
seriously considered it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Kudos to you
Seriously.
for, and
Not-
not on my sake, but on the sake of your kids, that you understand what they need.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
well,
parents who don't, honestly.
right, exactly, well, because they don't know what's available. I would not have considered it probably for Alexis, because she was a deep introvert. She doesn't like being with people. She's an introvert and a strong empath, so being with people is very difficult for her.
Mhm.
Sean would have thrived in this environment. But
Yeah, part of our-
because they wasn't available, you know, we were doing homeschooling, and we found community, but it's harder when you're homeschooling to build community.
Right.
And that's really, you know, what Sudbury offers that you can't get as easily. You can make it in homeschooling, we did, but Sudbury provides that mutual support, that community, that situation where a kid can go, oh, look at this, and everybody gathers around, they get all excited, and the excitement builds. It's, you know, it's mutually supportive in an easier way than homeschooling.
So it's distinctly an alternative to homeschooling.
Yeah. And not all homeschoolers would want this.
Oh no, that's why I'm trying to make the distinction of
Right.
life schooling versus whatever you would call the traditional homeschooling, I suppose.
Right.
Which would just be school at your house, and it's the same
Yes,
curriculum and the
you
same
can do
concepts.
you can do any
Yeah.
curriculum at home,
Yeah.
and a lot of parents do because the social and the emotional and the spiritual components
Sure.
of public school.
And for the record, you know, if a parent is concerned of kids learning specific topics, we tell them, look, you're free to teach them that at home still. If you want to spend an hour and they get home on Monday and now we're going to learn some math, I mean, we're not going to stop you. But in the meantime, they're going to also have their days at Sudbury doing what they really wanted and getting the value of that.
So what's the tuition for an average Sudbury school?
Something like $6,000 a year.
That's it?
Yeah. We do. If you look at
That
top,
is so marketable,
I hope so. I'm trying to market it.
especially in
Especially around here, there are schools around here that charge $18,000 a year.
Exactly.
And I just need a few of those kids to show up. But I had to figure out how to break that bubble or whatever those people live. Yeah, we tend to charge less than a Montessori or whatever. And the way we're able to do that is we are focused keenly on the philosophy, where philosophy comes free, and not on buying everyone an iPad or buying, you know, another round of textbooks. Or all our, I mean, I remember when every kid at Stevenson's got, you know, an electronic provided for them. Like, they had laptops at home already. Can we send some of this money to CPS or something? I feel like there's an injustice here, you know. So yeah, we don't spend on a lot of things that seem impressive, but aren't. Also, our teachers tend not to be paying off a whole lot of student debt because we don't require you to go get a master's in regular teaching. You're not doing regular teaching. You're doing Sudbury teaching, which is very different. It's a different skill set. You learn by the sort of an informal apprentice system. Have you been to another Sudbury school? Did they like you? You know. So those are my credentials Sudbury-wise. Though I've also worked with kids currently through the Buffalo Grove Park District before and after school program, and I can spot some free-spirited kids there who are chafing at the system. believe you me, at least when I'm there with me, we're playing some games and whatever. But you can tell they're just getting more burnt out through each day of the stuff they hate to do. So I want those kids, along with thousands of others like them, to have an alternative.
Yeah. And so the training takes what for a staff? What's the training involved?
Well, that's very informal. So
Time and
if you spend a couple of weeks at a Sudbury school, you could call it, and got good reviews from the people there. You could call it, all right, you're good enough to start, essentially. Whether you work with the individual kids at some new school, does kind of depend on the personalities of the kids and whatever new situations come up. But just being able to be staff-esque for a couple of weeks at a regular Sudbury school and to be accepted already puts you way ahead of most people. Most people, when they visit a Sudbury school, they either try to order the kids around because they assume that's what they do as adults. You know, all right, kids, let's learn about China. And then like the kids wander off like, hey, no, come back here. I said we're learning about China, you know. And the kids, no, what do you, bye. Or they do a sort of fishbowl routine of like, wait, you guys, how do you find out what to do every day? What? How does that work? Aren't you just lazy all the time? Which is less offensive, but still not keyed into like, of course kids can be free. So when I started volunteering at Tallgrass, and I was a volunteer, not a staffer, their process was just show up. There was no seminar to take, there was no college credentials, it was show up, meet everyone, and we'll keep an eye on you and see if you get along with the kids. And I did. So that's what we got.
I presume that there's a vetting in terms of
Background checks?
Yeah.
Yes,
background
we do
checks
that
and
too.
stuff like that. Yeah.
That's a common sense type of thing that's involved there too. But as far as teaching credentials, you know, we don't check, do you have a master's in teaching? We check, do you get along with the kids and respect them and treat them as people who are allowed to make their own decisions.
Can you envision sort of starting smaller, like doing summer programs?
Yes, I'm willing to be creative about this, and if we could set something up that's just meeting this summer or whatever, you know, then do we get a lease for a place that's just through the summer, or can we do things at people's houses, or can we do things that meet on like Saturdays during the school year? At that point, you know, you're not going to get the full Sudbury effect if you're going to the regular traditional school 5 days a week and Sudbury 1 day a week, but still that 1 day can make a big difference to you. Certainly
To the mental health.
to the mental health, you know, it can be the emergency release valve or whatever, where you just get to be yourself for a while. So I'm happy to provide that. I'm still figuring out the details how. That's partly why I came to everyone here.
So have you linked in with the homeschool community?
I have.
The homeschool communities, the gifted communities, the special needs communities.
Mhm.
Those are 3 areas where you'd find your students.
Okay. I've contacted a number of homeschool groups. There's one out in Elgin that does sort of a Sudbury thing just on Tuesdays. So I drive out there between my morning and afternoon shifts. They're in winter session right now, winter break right now. But generally, yeah, I go and see them. Other places just haven't gotten back to me, and I think maybe it's because I'm not a parent myself. So I don't necessarily fit into somebody's categorization of how this normally goes. So, but yeah, if you know any more specific contacts, I mean, I just go on Facebook and look up, you know, homeschoolers, Chicago, North Chicago, that sort of thing. Meet a few people that way. That's what I'm doing.
We'll talk.
Thank you.
I think that would be a fabulous resource for you. But I think if you could somehow do some kind of a pilot in the summer,
Okay.
that would basically.
Or spring break.
And our spring break.
Spring break would be a good start.
You think enough people are in town? A lot of people take vacations. I mean, a lot of people, so you're right.
Your
That's
homeschool.
right. No, that's right. See?
They
Yeah.
don't go, they
That's
don't
still-
care when
that's
break
right.
is.
That's right. Okay.
But if you wanna be able to draw from both
Thank you.
communities. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have an advisory board, a board of trustees yet?
No. So the deal is, first off, well, because I was thinking the legal side of getting incorporated, you need a board of 3 people. And I got me and one other collaborator who's seriously on board, who's not here today. Looking for the third person who's invested enough to be on the board. I have a number of people who are helped out here and there, but no one has yet said they want to make the leap. So until I have a third person, I'm unincorporated still. Likewise, the board of advisors, hey, if you want to be involved on that, you can. You totally know more than the average person about life schooling.
So you need to write up a job description
Okay.
for each of these.
Okay.
So that people know what they're getting involved, what they're getting into.
Yeah.
You know, when you say you want to be on board of trustees or the board of advisors, my question is, how much time do you need from me?
Mm-hmm.
What do you need from me? Does it involve a financial commitment?
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And do you have a business plan?
Yeah, I could show you some numbers. I shouldn't have it with me. Some numbers on how the money would work.
Well, the business plan is a whole lot more than just how the money works.
Okay. So I should expand that then.
It's how do you market, it's how do you structure your staff, it's, you know, how do you structure the business, it's a lot more than just how the money works.
Okay. Yes.
So, well, first is more of a comment, is that wouldn't it be great if this country's public school systems offered different, you know,
Sure.
A Sudbury
Waldorf,
within.
regular, Sudbury, Montessori. I would have loved that as a parent. And I ran into issues, because I couldn't afford to keep sending my kids to places I had to pay money for, you know. So they ended up, you know, in this traditional schools because was free, you know. And you know, it was better for some of the three than others. But so that's sort of just a general comment that I've always wished we could move our society towards. But my question is, so if what happens when these kids go to college or to a workplace?
Yep.
And you're probably predicting my question.
I've heard it many times.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and they're not used to structure. They're not used to superiors telling them what to do, and they may be in, you know, college is pretty free form, but there's still things you have to do at certain times, and certainly a workplace where maybe you have to be there at a certain time and you have to take lunch. You know, how does that transition work for these kids? Are they just mature enough by then that they can just adapt?
Yeah, they're very adaptable. So I could point you to peer-reviewed scientific study, the American Journal of Education, I believe, where they actually checked up on that and interviewed kids who had graduated from Sudbury. And they said they found no particular difficulty adjusting to later life. They actually said that compared with their traditional school counterparts also entering college, they found themselves to be much more curious, inventive, and adaptable than other people who are just sort of trugging through the system. You know?
Right.
That's why colleges are so happy to have self-directed kids join up, because they realize that these kids will distinguish themselves later in life, which makes the college look good. As far as choosing a college, first off, but also choosing a career, these kids are first off very, very keen on, they know what they want. They'll choose a business that suits them. If they are still allergic, fundamentally to working in office, they'll find something that doesn't involve an office. A lot of them, they do end up working in an office, but they have like amazing hobbies or something going on in the evenings and weekends and so forth. They're good at reading the culture of a place when they work at it to see if this is a place that will be reasonably adapt to my needs, or are they just a bunch of jerks? And if so, they move on.
Right.
Also, our kids are 3 times more likely than traditional school kids to become entrepreneurs, according to the best statistics I have. It's a little hard to make
Which is
direct
where the
comparisons.
economy is going.
Which is where the economy is going, and even if it wasn't, the mere having the ability to do that is a great hedge against all the corporations being a jerk to you, and you feel like I've got, no options.
Right.
Sudbury kids always have options. They've been making their own options all this time.
Yeah.
So I wish I had the exact numbers, but they have, the number of kids that they've surveyed, and essentially no one regrets having gone to Sudbury School. Like everyone just, they see the whatever deficits there might be in there are greatly outweighed by the pluses.
Can I respond as well? Yeah, so the question is, this is the same question that's asked of homeschoolers.
Right.
What has happened in the last 10, probably the last 10 years. There's been a dramatic shift in the way higher education institutions look at non-traditional learners. And what they've realized is that those non-traditional learners are used to regulating their own time. They're used to being independent and managing their own needs, their own obligations and
Which
commitments.
so many freshmen in college struggle with.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they're actually better prepared
Yeah. I
for
can
a
see that,
college
yeah.
learning environment than your average public school kid. So now what's happening is that virtually all schools have a homeschoolers page on their websites with specific
Requirements
procedures for how to apply. It
Right.
does not necessarily include tests.
Right.
It does sometimes, but not always. It almost always requires a portfolio. Homeschoolers can create resumes. I mean, not resumes, transcripts, just like anybody else. And so you create your transcript. So would a Sudbury student. Their transcript would look more project-oriented potentially, but it could also be packaged as courses,
Yeah.
however you want to do that.
What happens with
And-
the
and-
state
And
testing
so, and
requirements?
one more point is, so colleges are actually beginning to seek out homeschoolers preferentially.
Yeah.
I could point you to some homeschoolers who went to Harvard. I saw an article.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I know one of them,
Yeah.
and she's a brilliant physicist.
Would you like to speak at an event like this sometime? Because that would.
She's not Sudbury, she's homeschooled.
Even so, for someone to make the point that colleges are more open-minded than most people realize,
Yeah.
Oh, I can.
it would be a
yeah,
related
don't-
point.
That I could get you.
So how do you get around state testing requirements? How does
Turns
Sudbury
out
schools
you
deal
don't
with that?
have to obey them.
Oh, okay.
If you're a private school.
If we're a private school.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So we're not
Okay,
going to
I
be
didn't
charged.
realize that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
No, the state of Illinois does not force you. They have health codes and fire codes and stuff, but they do
Yeah.
not actually force the private schools to
Okay.
take any tests at all.
Okay.
That said, all of the kids will learn about the Constitution.
Oh yeah,
Well, yeah.
we get around to it.
It's
yeah.
inherent. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Sooner or
eventually
later,
they
you would
start
learn
going
about
into-
history. I remember actually with Tallgrass one time when some of the kids had set up their own history class and asked the staffer to do it like once a week, you know. And I was there on the day where they had just heard the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech. They were like so interested in all this because again, the ones who didn't want to learn history that day hadn't made a history class in the first place.
So they do some group learning.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's not that you must be by yourself; it's that you
Okay.
may be if you want
Okay.
to.
Do they take classes outside of the physical?
In fact, I should mention that it's common in your last year or two of Sudbury to take a class or two at a community college, just to see what that environment is like, to build up a very small formal transcript.
Which then adds credibility to the grades you might get in Sudbury.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. Homeschoolers do that as well. It's strongly recommended that you take
Yeah.
some classes of some sort to indicate that, you know, even in a formal learning situation, you can do well.
Right.
And it's really remarkable when you think about it, how, first off, the colleges will take you even though you don't have a high school diploma yet. I didn't know that was an option.
Oh, yeah.
And secondly,
That's only been within the last 15 years, I would say. Yeah.
okay, well, even so. Whatever it depends on the individual college. But,
Yes.
and the other part of that is, when I got to college, it was way easier than high school. The AP classes I took to prepare for college were harder than the actual college classes. And I wasn't doing some community college, I was up in Carthage, you know, and they're pretty well known. Which begs the question, if college is going to be harder than high school, why do we have high school at all? Just graduate 8th grade and go straight to college, apparently, at least.
Community college is easier.
If college is easier than high school, then why have high school at all? You know, then just go to your community college. You can do that directly.
Yeah.
And even if you took half the course load, right? Then by the time you turn 18, you'd have 2 years of college under your belt. You'd have your associates already, and you'd be less stressed out than if you'd been to the traditional schools.
Although my daughter's had that experience of going to college and finding it easier than high school.
Yeah.
But she's a freshman in college this year. But all of her friends have not had that experience
Okay.
because they didn't go to as stringent a high school. And so she's found herself doing something which she really loves, which is teaching them and helping them with study skills and teaching them how to manage their time,
Yeah.
because they never had to do that before.
Right.
And she did, and she's kind of a naturally good at that sort of thing, and so she's enjoying that part of college. It's not on the curriculum, but she's getting a lot out of it. So yeah,
Well,
I think
yeah.
that's the thing that bothers me so much about our educational system, is that it's so unequal. You know,
Yes.
the North
That's very
Shore
much-
compared to almost anywhere else, you know.
Well, that's
just-
a more even that's
it's
a more
tragic.
complex point than it
Yeah.
seems, because, as I told you in my story, I went to the best of schools.
Yeah, right.
And it ended up
And
being
even
the worst
so.
of experiences. So,
Yeah.
freaking,
Yeah.
you know, we got to have a better perspective on what
Right.
people need. And,
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of it too is the needs are not met of students who have alternative learning styles.
Right. Oh, for sure.
If you don't fit
Right.
into
Oh,
the
yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
schools are shifting.
Yeah.
It's an evolving, but it's
Yeah.
still slow. If
Right.
fundamentally, if you don't do sit down, shut up, and listen
Right.
style of learning,
Right.
you're not going
You're
to
not
thrive
right.
in
I
that
had a-
environment. And that's a growing percentage of the population
Yeah.
because of all of the screen time.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, the visual
Yeah.
cortex is larger
Mm-hmm.
in the digital
Yeah.
generations than it is in the non-digital generations. And the
Mm-hmm.
auditory cortex is compensatorily smaller.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that, so we take kids that are, and also they're more interpersonal, they're more tactile. So you take all of these kids that
Yeah.
are visual, tactile, interpersonal learners, put them in a classroom that is a sit down, shut up, and listen. It is exactly
Mhm.
the opposite
Mm-hmm.
of every style that they
But I
have. They're
don't-
learning strengths.
I think it's important not to express sit down, shut up, and listen as a negative school environment, because that actually works really well
Yes,
for some
that's a
kids.
point.
It doesn't work for me. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna say
exactly.
That.
So,
I don't think we can agree
let
on
me
that one.
finish.
Yeah.
I had I knew a family, and they had one child in a Montessori school, one child in a traditional public school, and one child in a Catholic parochial school. And I got to know, I'm like, what the heck? They were like a year apart. They were really close to each other. I'm like, what the heck? What? It didn't make any sense to me, right? And she described her kids' learning styles
Uh-huh.
and their personalities.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
You know, and so the very structured parochial school was just terrific for her daughter, who, you know, would be an anxious mess in a Sudbury school,
Right.
from what she described,
Right.
because she could that
She needs the structure.
she needs the structure. She needs the calm. She needs the quiet. So I think there needs to be a place for all of those kids, and
Agreed.
unfortunately, they're all funneled into, one type of school if they want free school.
Well, I like to say this,
Right.
as part of our philosophy is allowing kids to choose, that includes the choice of, do you want to go to a Sudbury school at all?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
if they, come to me after a couple weeks in Sudbury and said, nope, never mind, this isn't for me, I'll be like, oh, that's up to you. Because again, education is up to you.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to stop you if you want to go back to regular school or a parochial school or whatever school
Right.
they may find is best suited
Yeah.
for them. If it really is suited for them, I'm not going to stop.
Yeah, Andrea, I have great respect for the solitary auditory
Mhm.
learner.
Right.
That's not, I don't mean, when I say sit down, shut up, and
Mhm.
listen, that's the way it's perceived
By a group
people
that
who
doesn't-
don't
right.
do that
makes
learning
sense.
style.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's why I use
Right.
that term. But yes, I should have been more diplomatic about it.
I want to comment a little bit about the current high school versus college experience. As I think has already been admitted, whether high school is easier or harder than college depends entirely on which high school and which college. Because, my two grandsons who are in college now. One went to they both went to Hinsdale Central, which is the equivalent of Stevenson, give or take. And so one went to a school that's academically quite easy for him because he's already had so much. The other one is at one of the most selective schools in the country, and so it's challenging. So if you want to be challenged, you need to go to a challenging school.
If you want to be, I'm not going to stop you.
Now, as far as the learning styles, I thought that was very interesting, your comments on that the screen time learning is in some ways the opposite of the old-fashioned classroom. I thought that was an interesting insight. However, I will say that in the Oak Brook School, Oak Brook Hinsdale School Districts, if that's, assuming that's true, which is as far as I can tell, they're getting quite a balance of different learning styles right there already because they're using the computer so much and they're having the classroom lectures and discussions. Plus, the big thing that has not been mentioned is the trend, at least in my grandchildren's schooling, to have group projects,
Yes,
group learning, group grades, etc.
right.
And this works great for some kids and
That are
less great
interpersonal.
for others. But what they're getting actually is a big variety of the computer, the lecture, classroom discussion, and the group. So I actually,
It
in
depends.
some ways, I think what my grandchildren, let's be specific because it depends. They're getting, in those senses that have been mentioned, a fairly balanced approach to learning. I think the biggest problem that I observed in the lower grades and when I did daycare for kindergartners, which is very eye-opening because they had half a day of kindergarten, half a day with me, right? They kept telling me how much more they loved my house than kindergarten. The biggest difference is that in kindergarten, you get 20 minutes for the art project, then you have to put it away.
Yep.
So you can't really do.
What's up with these schedules?
Some of these kids would work for an hour or two on their art,
Yep.
not because I told them to sit still. I
Right.
mean, you know, the thing is that it's, and probably, and people are, also it's parents' fault when they keep overscheduling them.
Oh, yeah?
Used to be after school was the time that you could do your projects and explore your own
That's right, you used to have more
interests.
time.
So,
The school day used to be shorter too.
I think there's a lot of things, a lot of good ideas from the Sudbury schools that can be incorporated in life and public schools and home life. You know, in general for all kids, not just for extremely free-spirited or.
Right, and
Yeah.
what you're saying about how school teaching is being structured is as I said, a growing trend, but it is not by any stretch of the imagination, the predominant across the country.
Right.
There are some schools and some administrators that are very progressive and they're doing this, but it is not consistent by any stretch of the
There's no
imagination, it is
consistency.
not the majority. Most kids, and even in those environments, as Jim was talking about, I know some young people that have gone to Stevenson, and Stevenson is one of those that's like
High pressure school.
They are so stressed, even though the learning styles are being
There's
addressed.
a lot of
You
stress.
talk about styles.
Too much stress.
People typically talk about
Yeah.
styles in terms of visual, auditory, whatever, but my preferred thing is,
Personal style as well.
universal, but my preferred thing is just how much freedom does the kid have? Because that's the essential nutrient that I was missing out on.
Right,
You know,
that's why, I said personal
Oh,
style,
personal
not
style.
interpersonal, personal style. Do you need that freedom? That's a key component of your learning style.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
for many others, it's an unrecognized problem. It's such a large scale problem. It's bizarre that more people aren't. There's some talk of reforming the schools, but I mostly hear like, oh, I don't know, kids these days are stressed. Maybe we'll have a committee to talk about it and sort of issue a press release next month.
Well, it
and
has to be
nothing else.
data driven or it won't be financed.
Or it has to be data driven, or there's like all these obstacles in the way, and I'm just like, I've been to Tallgrass, the kids are already free. And the Tallgrass is across the street from a regular school, by the way. And we would like watch the kids sometimes with their backpacks, just like, ah.
Right,
And we're just like, well, you should come over here sometime, you know.
Well, there's another component of Sudbury that we haven't yet talked about, and that is not just the freedom, but also the integration of the subjects. Everything is connected. You're not
Everything's
just
actually connected, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not just studying history. You're studying a culture, a component of which is history, and that culture includes the science and it includes the math.
But you're, I mean, that sounds like curriculum.
No,
Well,
no, it's a naturally evolving thing.
Okay,
If a kid is interested in Jamaica,
Right.
they're going, they're gonna go start reading about Jamaica, they're gonna watch movies about Jamaica, they're gonna,
At some point they
do
pick up on the
Jamaica,
music or something.
they're
and now
gonna,
they're into
they're gonna
music.
practice Jamaican culture, they're gonna say, wait a minute, this was invented in Jamaica, I wonder how that science works. They're gonna, they're gonna look at the economy, that's math.
Well, I'll give you an
You know,
example
all
that
of that,
actually
it's
occurred
all
to
of
me.
an integrated thing.
Yeah.
And yes, I've seen the reading happen. My daughter went from no reading to reading E.B. White out loud in the car in 4 months
Yeah.
at age 8.
Yeah.
Because she was ready. She wasn't ready before. And so, that they don't go to work with diapers in their briefcase. They learn how to do it. And it just naturally happens. And what I like about homeschooling and about Sudbury and that with that kind of freedom and child-directed learning is all the subjects are all of a piece. You're learning about the web of life.
To give an example, when I was at Hudson Valley Sudbury School, these kids were all playing this single-player computer game, and you had to take turns, right? Which, first off, they were really good at figuring out who was in line, and if you leave the room and come back, and then is he in the front of the line now, or is he in the back, or we have another computer, we split the line. All this social negotiation that the kids I normally see at work tend to be really bad at. The Sudbury kids were like really smoothly figuring everything out. No one got upset. I'm the adult in the room, just like, this is all working itself out. I don't need to do anything. And then secondly, though, while this one kid was waiting for his turn, he started asking me about like the solar system, and then he jumped to like chemical elements, and he wanted to know like what was the symbol for silver, and I said, oh, Ag. He's like, why is Ag silver? I said, that's from argentum, which is Latin for silver. He says, I'd like to learn Latin. I said, okay. So I got like a YouTube video on how to learn Latin, and we both watched the same video, and I'm filling him in the bits that he doesn't know. So they end up connecting things like crazy.
Yes.
Instead of having it siloed into now it's Latin class,
Yes.
now it's chemistry
Siloed
class.
is
now
the
it's-
word. Yes,
yeah.
that's the word I was looking for. Yes.
And that's the way life works. Everything is naturally connected. We pretend it's not connected
Right.
in order to make bureaucrats happy.
And the number of times that I've had that, you start here and you go over here and you go, wow. Yeah, that's the exciting part.
Well, I wish you all the luck in the world. I think it would be great for more kids to have this kind of option if they
Are you
needed it.
looking for patrons?
Yes.
That should be part of the pitch.
Oh, I thought I said that when I was like, any help you can provide. Did we
That's not.
more specific thing about the word patron?
Yes, yes, yes.
I mean, I was told not to ask for money, if that's what you're trying to get at. I am forbidden from asking in this context.
Okay.
So, but any help you can provide, people, whatever that may be.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. You're very articulate, Jimmy,
Thank you.
and passionate, and it's you're a great storyteller.
Well, thanks to Paul for nixing my first version of this, which was more boring, and then I upped the game.
Good for you, Paul. Good for you.
First time I wrote it, it was more like business-like, and I was like, no, it's tell your story. Like, okay, that
Yeah.
makes more sense.
Yeah, yeah, how this worked.
Well, I think what you have to do is figure out where the parents are, who would be interested.
Yeah, how to like reach them, how to advertise or something, where they hang out. Where do you find people whose kids are stressed out about school? I don't know the location or the publication that reaches them exactly.
Talk to me.
I will talk to you, okay?
Also talk to Jen Merrill.
Okay, I'll get her this number or something, directory.
I can give you that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, good luck.
Thank you very much.